the heat wave in Accra is crazy. Like everywhere hot. Everywhere hot, nowhere cool. Why, bro? Who did we offend? What is happening?
So, in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of discussions, or what I call media attention, including social media, on the extreme heat, especially in Accra. And these concerns are real. I think it's something that we need to all pay attention to, because, if you look at it generally, Accra is a big city, and as a city, it's a place that what I call is known for generating a lot of activities. So the concerns that people are talking about are actually very real, but I think it's important that we get the science behind it as well, so that we don't just come up with explanations or artificial explanations for why this is happening. So first off, the concern is real, and so I'm going to try and explain to you why this heat is occurring.
You go switch on fan, then you blow heat. For the aces, I don't even want to talk about, because the aces they are sweating, bro. What is happening?
Let's break it down to the key causes. The very first one is what we call climate change. And this is what we call long-term warming. And over the years, Ghana has been increasing. Ghana, in terms of temperature, has been increasing. The average temperature. When we say average temperature, it means that if you look at temperature over the last 20 years, it is not normal. That's something that we've been seeing. In the past, a hot day in Ghana or in the cities may be something between 32 to 33 degrees Celsius. That's normal time. But now we frequently experience 34 to, let's say, 36 degrees Celsius, and sometimes even higher. Okay? So when the hot season basically arrives, it builds an already warmer climate. And that's something that, we're experiencing. A very simple analogy that I can use is like, you're starting a race halfway, up a hill, and then you reach the peak faster and feel the strain more. And that's what we're experiencing right now. So that's number one. Apart from climate change, there's also what we call seasonal effect, okay? Just so that people understand, this period of the year is actually the hottest time of the year in Ghana by our frequency. So March and April are naturally hotter months in Ghana. And this happens very often or every year. Why is that so? Because around this time of the year, the sun is more direct. As a country in the tropics, the sun is more direct, which means that it's actually overhead. Then also there's less cloud cover. And with less cloud cover, it means that directly we get, the sun rays coming up. And the land is also very dry generally. And so that also means that, our exposure to climate is going to be more and more intense. So this is also another reason why at this point we are seeing that. Then we can come to the third reason of what we call the city being an island. There's a concept of the city being having what we call the heat island effect. What it means is that we see that in our cities, it's full of concrete. We have all kinds of buildings, glasses, concrete. And by nature, these things absorb heat during the day, and then in the night they release the heat. Then obviously that happens in our homes, market spaces, and many other places. So the current issue of extreme heat that we're experiencing is a combination of these multiple factors, and not just one factor that we can talk about. So there's a climate change angle, there's also the normal seasonal effect angle, then there's also the fact that infrastructure that we have in our cities are also designed in such a way that they absorb heat and then they release the heat. And so fundamentally, when it comes to the infrastructure part, because we don't have a lot of greens, and that's something that I think we should be paying attention to. There's limited green spaces or trees, and as it's happening on social media, people are aware that less greens is more heat. And so that's a challenge that I think we need to be looking at. Less greens, because the greens are able to also capture some of these heat and absorb them in our spaces. And so those are three key things that I think we should be looking at carefully when we talk about heat in Accra. So currently, the heat that we're experiencing has, a significant health impact. People may be experiencing what are called more headaches, and that's something that the evidence has shown, that they could also be experiencing dizziness, and then they could also be experiencing excessive sweat, and then also dehydration. And that is, basically dehydration. These are actually symptoms or issues that can actually cause damages to our body system. So I think For instance, if you think about a trader who's standing within the sun from morning to afternoon, this person is a high risk of heat stress. Heat stress is, when you get exposed too much, and then you're likely to be, having headaches or dizziness, or what we call the dehydration, and also excessive sweating. And so these are things that I think we need to be paying attention to carefully if we are, people who work in different spaces. So like I said, even school children, there's something that if they're exposed too much to the sun during the lunchtime or break time, it can cause them these sort of challenges. So these are things that I think we need to be paying attention to, and then ensuring that we don't expose ourselves too much to it. Maybe I'll look at it first of all from the household level. Okay, in our homes, unfortunately nowadays we are building, and having, glass within the buildings, these sort of windows, and these windows tend to retain a lot of heat. So I think one very simple advice is, let's try and not be too much indoor. If you have those homes that we have no air condition, even if you have fans, you should spend some time within the outside of the homes. But where you want to be indoor too, I think you should be able to, properly open your windows and allow some fresh air to come in. I mean, if you have a home where you have trees as well, I think it's better to stay close to some of those, trees and other things, so that you get some fresh air instead of just being in the room and taking the heat. Again, it's important. School children, for instance, I think when they're going to school, we should give them a lot of water, and we should guide them on, how to take their water within different times of the day, especially during the break time when they go out. Water is different from what I call the drinks or juices that we give to our kids. Water is very powerful. So let's give a lot of water to our kids when they're going to school. But if you're also working in market spaces or outdoor, including artisans, my advice is to ensure that you take a lot of water, so you don't get dehydrated. People who are working in petrol stations, who are mechanics, just have water around you all the time so that you can drink enough and avoid headaches and dizziness, as I spoke about. And so this is something that can be done. But again, in the long term, it's important that people start looking at, having greens in their spaces. But in the short term, like I mentioned, water is very important, and also not finding yourself in an enclosed space for too long. It will help to, reduce your exposure to the different kinds of potential health hazards that we have. So the heat, unfortunately, is not going to go away anytime soon. It's part of the seasonality that we have. But I expect that, from late April to May, when the rains begin to come, the intensity will be down. But I think it's an everyday lifestyle that we need to be changing. We need to be drinking more water, just to emphasize on that, and also not being indoor for too long. And because the air conditioning cannot always do the job. If you have an air condition, that's fine. But more exposure. But in some areas as well, for example, if you're somebody who works, who do intensive jobs, I think you can also have some damp cloth and put it on your body. Where you feel too hot, you can damp, and then put it on your body so that it can reduce the body temperature a bit for you. So these are some everyday things that we can do to address